What are the top offensive coordinator storylines in the NFL entering 2024? We're breaking those down for you today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joe, off-season Hard Knocks is it.
Yes, I didn't see the fullness of the second episode yet, but I'm excited.
Did you see the clip that I sent you?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Did you see the negotiations with Saquon Barkley clip?
I didn't see that one yet, no.
Okay. Did you see Joe Shane going over to the Patriots booth at the Combine to put a little bug in Elliott Wolf's ear about, hey, call me if you have any plans to move down from 3?
He wanted to move up, didn't he? They wanted one of these quarterbacks, didn't they?
Yeah.
They wanted Drake May, right?
Well, you watched the Drake May exchange with him and Brian Daboll. What an awesome bit of content that was.
Yeah.
Everything you hoped it would be, right? And it's like Daboll, for all the questions that we have about him as a head coach and the situation in New York, and a lot of it's not necessarily his fault, and as good of a job as they did in year one. The billing as an offensive mind, seeing him like, what's that new one of the new like memes or like sayings is like someone that matches your freak, right? Like Drake May matched Brian Daboll's freak, and they just couldn't make it happen with the draft.
Is there a special phrase for that I need to be aware of, or is it
just match your freak?
He matches
like
your
somebody
freak.
Who's on the same wavelength as you. I think it's a little bit more explicit than that. Like
okay,
and how it's often applied.
Okay,
but
yeah, very.
You could see it in Brian Daboll's eyes, right?
Yeah,
he's listening to Drake May talk about the protection, and he understands it's they're going to push this. The center's going to push to the will, and Rita because we're going to the right, and he understood what the lingo meant as far as like the coded language for what the route distribution was. Yeah, it was really fun to see Brian Daboll and Drake May, that little snippet that made the cut.
Am I doing this correctly?
Oh God.
Oh boy, yeah, right. I'm very questionable.
We'll find out.
We're going to find out. Is it fair to say that Brian Daboll connected with Drake May's Riz? Is that it? No?
I'll give it a 2 out of 5 stars.
Okay. I wasn't going for a joke. I was just trying to.
I understand you weren't going for a joke. I'm just the application. I don't know that Drake May was trying to riz up Brian Daboll.
Oh well, I don't know. Okay,
let's riz up some of these OC situations.
Was that a better, more appropriate use of the riz?
Who the best situations across the league? So I wanted to spotlight as we get into this conversation. And we're not going to go like group by group because there's still a lot of ambiguity as far as play callers and head coaches. And I think there's like 8 offensive coordinators that have been in their post since prior to 2023 in the entire league. Like the turnover is crazy, right?
There's only one that's been there longer than 2022, and it's Kyle Shanahan.
Right.
I mean, this thing's getting flipped upside down. That's it.
They just don't even bother with the OC, and nor should they.
Right.
But,
It's like, Chris Forrester, you're the run game coordinator, and that's all we're doing.
Right. We had 6 total situations that got a maximum score from you and me combined, and we were consensus on 4 out of the 6.
Okay.
So our consensus top play caller situations were Ben Johnson in Detroit, who Bobby Babich just gave his flowers to.
Did
it was
I miss this?
Yeah, it was on the Eric Wood podcast. Said the Lions were the toughest team to prepare for because they do so many different things and they do them all well.
Okay. Got to deal with them this year. Okay.
Matt Nagy in Kansas City, which is really Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm.
Mike LaFleur with the LA Rams, which is really Sean McVay. Kyle Shanahan. Those were the 4 consensus situations. And then we rounded out a lot, not all of, but a lot of the Shanahan tree, where you gave a maximum score to Matt LaFleur / Adam Stanovich in Green Bay. And I gave my 5th spot to Frank Smith / Mike McDaniel in Miami. Those are top 6 situations across the league.
Yeah, and I was what is that? A half of a I don't even know.
Point.
Quarter. Thank you. A half of a half. Oh, that's a quarter, Joe. Thanks. A quarter of a point away from the full score on Frank Smith / Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, and Green Bay was the first one that missed the cut for me on the other side. So we kind of consensus see the top 6
very similarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, like you mentioned, a lot of Shanahan influence there, which there could be more of that very soon, right? I think another year of Bobby Slowik, and he delivers there, he'll be right up there with all these guys, and certainly some other guys.
Interview this past year,
yeah, well, he's in this mix already, but like, there's guys like Zac Robinson, like guys that can come in as the McVay influence, right? There's guys that are knocking on the door. We just need to see a little bit more. Clearly doing a lot with that offense, but I mean, I guess it kind of stands out to me that Ben Johnson and Matt Nagy / Andy Reid aren't. Like, they're the non whatever McVay Shanahan scheme we're calling that. They're the 2 guys that aren't necessarily disciples there that rank very highly. So interesting mix, but thought that it was kind of neat to contrast those 2 guys out.
Yeah. So obviously the Shanahan tree is the buzz offensively across the league right now. It's this decade's flavor of what everybody wants. And I think Bobby Babbitt's quote to Eric Wood about Ben Johnson speaks volumes about why Detroit is here. You know, they have, from a personnel standpoint, they don't have an offensive line that they can run zone, they can run gap, they can pass protect under stress. Like they can do all of that, and it allows them, they're not hindered by the strengths of what they are up front to be able to do everything. And I think that as a play caller, it gives you a lot of freedom for what you want to do on a week-to-week basis, depending on what you see. And I think that's where Detroit really does shine, is the different ways that they attack you, but they blend it well with like Dan Campbell and his aggressiveness. And they've got an experienced quarterback in Jared Goff that can handle everything that you have to do to be able to do all of these things. And it's just this really, really nice blend. And then you have Andy Reid, who's been at it for so long that their lexicon of what they want to do and can do is pretty robust. But maybe they're not as diverse as Detroit is, but they've seen every look you're possibly going to throw at them with Andy. So he has that well to tap into.
I think one of the other interesting common denominators of these top, is it 6 or 1, 2, 3, 6? Lions, Chiefs, Rams, Niners, Dolphins, Packers. I would say 5 of those 6 very clearly value speed, right? Like the Rams are the outlier. Like no speed there, right? None at all.
You do that well.
Okay, yeah, they tried. They tried with some speed. I mean, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, like nobody's confusing these guys for their jet packs, right? Like that's not what those guys are.
Right.
All those other teams, and most recently the Chiefs, with their emphasis on speed with the acquisitions of Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy in the draft. Speed is a big part of this. And I find that to be a pretty fascinating layer. Like you talk about unteachable stuff, right? Sometimes you're just faster than other people, and you can break pursuit angles and win foot races. And I think that attacking voids in space and coverage schemes with speed creates a lot of problems for defenses. And I think you can kind of see a clear theme of that being an emphasis for these top situations when it comes to play calling.
I think it's really fascinating too. And I know we have a lot to get to, but just kind of looking at the personnel usage of each one of these teams, the Rams are what the Rams are, right? We're an 11 personnel team. They were in 11 personnel and 82% of first downs last year.
Right, but they do the receiver that they use, the insert blocker,
right?
Like It started with Robert Woods, right? And then that's an important piece. They just do it different.
Puka Nacua,
yeah.
And it was Ben Skoranek, and everybody lost their mind about that, right? Like, that's where they get their versatility. But then you look at the other first down personnel groups, and they all show up in different categories. The Packers were third in 12 personnel on first down in the NFL last year. You go to 13 personnel. The Chiefs led the league in 13 personnel on 1st and 10.
Yep.
Or you go to 21 personnel. That's the Dolphins and 49ers at first and second with 48 and 42% of 1st and 10s. They were in 21 personnel with 2 backs. So all of these teams are represented in really different ways as far as, hey, when it's 1st and 10, what do we want to throw out there to kind of present and do our bread and butter type of stuff? That's really fun too.
Fascinating look at the premier play caller situations in the NFL, but there's plenty of storylines and things to get to with the rest of the group. We're going to do all of that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with us. Folks, there's nothing quite like being at the ballpark, taking in a Major League Baseball game during the summer. Well, if you want to do that, check out Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So maybe you want to make a last-minute decision to get to the ballpark. Game Time is your spot. They specialize in killer last-minute deals. They give you all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. So snag the tickets without the stress. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
I kind of hijacked the whole first segment.
I love what you did there.
I know you have a lot that you want to get into too, so I'm going to give you the floor here.
No, I appreciate that, but I also appreciate how that first segment came together. I thought that was a great way to kind of dive into it. So love that. If I may, I think when I considered, okay, storylines, NFL offensive coordinators, like what's the premier thing that really stands out to me? Boy, oh boy, do I have a long list. But I think the number one thing is Kellen Moore in Philadelphia. Storied run with the Dallas Cowboys, plenty of head coaching interviews, never really got one. Goes to the Chargers last year, and you're all excited. This is what Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert need to really get that offense going. Didn't really work out as well as you may have hoped. Of course, Justin Herbert gets injured, and now he's back in Philly. And what fascinates me about this hire in particular is Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. We talked about him yesterday. They thought about replacing him. I put it all on him. Everything I put on him last year for the collapse of that team, for the schematic failures of that team. He's the freaking head coach. You don't normally see an offensive-minded head coach make this type of hire for their offensive coordinator position. And now this is an Eagles offense. No, it doesn't have Jason Kelce, right? There's some turnover on the offensive line. They prepared for that, and they've developed offensive line as good as anyone. But I'm not trying to minimize the loss of Jason Kelce. I still think their offensive line is very, very good. Loaded with skill players, and Saquon Barkley. Like, that's a layer that we haven't seen in Philadelphia, back with that type of talent. And so, like, this is a huge year, not only for the Eagles and Nick Sirianni, but Kellen Moore. And I think his legacy as an offensive coordinator and what the trajectory of his coaching future is going to be.
Joe, for the record, Philly scored as the 4th best offensive line in our roster power rankings project that we did. So, yeah, the loss of Kelce hurts, but still a very, very good unit. And it's funny, I did the same thing I presume, did when I went to pull up the Kellen Moore Pro Football Reference sheet so that I could speak with educated facts about his trajectory. And I landed on his player page before I went to this.
Not as good. The coaching page looks a little better.
About that in the pre-show, and then I did the exact same thing. So
nicely done. Yeah,
I feel your pain. There's a lot of single-digit numbers during that run in Dallas, and you're sympathetic to the year that things kind of got off the rails with them this past year. You had a disastrous season, and then the year that things went off the rails really in Dallas, Dak Prescott only played in 5 games, right? And had that really ugly ankle injury that cost him the end of that season. And so you're sympathetic to the years that it hasn't really worked. And I do wonder if Kellen Moore's going to find himself, and he's still really young, right? Like, he's got a lot of time to end up getting a head coaching job. but it felt like the momentum for him kind of fell off with the end of season type stuff with Dallas and the postseason losses. And I don't necessarily know how fair that is versus the total body of work. So if a different head coaching situation with different talent, maybe there's that breakthrough with Philadelphia. Maybe that can kind of be the thing that spurs and reignites the momentum for Kellen Moore to potentially be a head coach in the NFL at some point.
You want me to keep going, or you got something?
Yeah, go ahead. Give me another one. I took a whole segment. So
all right. Well, how about Ryan Grubb? And
what a
brother,
fascinating situation.
Go ahead, set the stage here. I know that you've done a lot of research on this as well.
Yeah, Ryan Grubb is Mike McDonald's offensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks, and he comes to Seattle by way of the Pacific Northwest, but the Washington Huskies. And that was a team that played this really wide open style of offense with 3 draftable wide receivers, including a top 10 pick in Rome Odunze, and a lot of NFL talent, two top 64 picks at offensive tackle for that group this past year. They got a tight end that looks like he's going to be a player next year. And then, oh, by the way, a top 10 pick at quarterback. We had our questions with Michael Penix, but things really clicked there. There's a lot of NFL talent.
2 top 50 wide receivers, right? A top 10 receiver. Like, insane.
Like the list goes on and on for the NFL talent that he had. Going to Seattle, where you say, okay, we'd like to think they have a pair of young pillar tackles, depending on what Abraham Lucas's health situation is. There's more upward mobility for both of those guys. They have some insurance there at that spot. They have a tight end who could be an even bigger player than what he's been in Noah Fant. They've got 3 big-time investments in wide receivers with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf on second and third contracts, and a first-round pick in Jackson Smith and then they have a quarterback in Geno Smith that has the arm ability to kind of apply it. So it's like, how much of what they did that was just fireworks last year can you replicate in Seattle? And it's a really, really fascinating chemistry experiment, but I do kind of consider it a little bit of a chemistry experiment, especially early in the season.
Yeah, I think Seattle's entire situation fascinates me like crazy, and I see a lot of ceiling. Like, I'm excited to find out here because of what those people have done in their previous stints, but not a lot in the NFL, right? Like, not a whole lot of NFL success to point to. And what's even more fascinating about this is Mike McDonald, the head coach, defensive minded, young, right? Like, typically the go-to move for a hotshot young coordinator on one side of the ball is to get some type of like rock solid veteran experienced coordinator to handle the other side of the ball. Nope. Not at all. Intriguing, but they certainly didn't hedge. Like, you saw Sean McVay. What did he do? Wade Phillips, you're my defensive coordinator. Okay, he kind of makes sense to you. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. I'm optimistic. I really am. I think Seattle's a sleeper in the NFC, but I think how this coaching staff's able to set the tone, but then how they evolve throughout the course of the season as teams start to pick up on what they're doing is going to be huge.
Let me ask you this. And I have an answer that stands out to me quite a bit. Is there a new offensive play caller this year that you feel like is under an exceptional level of pressure?
A new one?
Yes.
That is under an exceptional level of pressure.
Yes. And I'll filibuster a little bit while you think.
Yeah, well, man, there's so many. There's so many that pop for me.
There's two in one division that kind of have some parallels with their situations for why they're under pressure that stand out to me.
It's Nathaniel Hackett, right?
That's not the one that I had.
Oh, he's not a new play caller. He's not a new player.
Right.
I didn't answer the question correctly.
So teams that have defensive-minded head coaches, that have veteran quarterbacks, that you're trying to...
Oh.
You got it? You got me?
I got a couple.
Okay.
I think you look at Greg Roman and Joe Brady.
Okay. It's also not the ones that I had, which is it makes it really fun. I had Liam Coen in Tampa Bay and especially Clint Kubiak in New Orleans.
Yeah, if I would have had more time to prep, I probably would have got there.
But I think it's a great illustration of there's guys in new spots that you need to figure it out with. But when you consider the Saints and their investment in Derek Carr and where that team is at right now versus their aspirations, and Clint Kubiak, he's been around the block a little bit with some meaningful coaches between Gary Kubiak, and he worked with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota with Mike Zimmer, and worked with Nathaniel Hackett, and then with San Francisco this past year. Like, he's been a lot of different spots. They overhauled that entire offensive staff. There's no blockade with the head coach that's going to have an influence over you and what you're doing. Right. Like that. There's a lot there for me where I look at Clint Kubiak in particular. I'm like, this could be a really boom situation for you if you hit it out of the park, but like, you're kind of on an island on your own as far as how this is going to go for you.
You familiar with the Parker McCollum song, Burn It Down? Probably not. Probably not, right?
I'm not.
Well, if this doesn't work in New Orleans this year, burn it down. Like Loomis, everybody's gone. We are going to reset. We're going to do the hard thing and get it going. This is absolutely a make or break year in New Orleans. And I, like you mentioned, they gutted that offensive coaching staff this year. They gutted the defensive coaching staff last year. Do or die time for the Saints. And I think that's really rooted in, like you mentioned there, Kubiak and what happens with the offense. Because I think the defense is going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
How good's that offense? All right. Obviously, there's a lot to get to. Plenty more to get to. So be sure to stick with us.
All right. Where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, millions of places. I think what I mentioned there, kind of when you were prompting me, Greg Roman, with Harbaugh, with the Chargers. What does that offense look like? I mean, you're not going to run, baby. Brother. You can't do three yards in a cloud of dust with Herbert as your quarterback, right? Like you can't.
People are excited for it.
Okay. We can be balanced, but like I want to maximize what I have in Justin Herbert, right? And candidly, we don't have the backs. We don't have the backs to do that with the Chargers. We got the O-line, but who? Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins?
I'll say this: there's a lot of upward mobility for the Chargers with their run-pass ratio. They ran the ball on 34% of snaps last year. Get it to 42. I mean, 42 would still be a top 5 number in the NFL last year, top 6 number in the NFL last year. It was San Francisco at 45, Atlanta at 44, Pittsburgh at 43. So they're going to be peas in a pod with Arthur Smith that they're 2 of the top 3 run rates in the NFL. Chicago, Baltimore, and Detroit were the other 42% run rate teams last year. So get into that stratosphere, and then you could still have Justin Herbert be a $50+ million a year quarterback and build play action passing off of it. And you should be able to take a lot of shots with that based on what you do. But there's a lot of room to go up as far as their investment in running the ball. But I agree with you with what you're saying that this is not necessarily a team that you feel has a lot of exciting horses to be able to do that. It's going to be a by committee, and how long is J.K. Dobbins going to be a part of the committee? Because that's kind of the book on J.K. Dobbins right now.
I like to pick my spots carefully whenever I like to invoke a Bills talking point into this podcast. I think Joe Brady.
You don't want to wait the show topic, right?
Right. Well, that, and I mean, if people want to hear me talk about the Bills, guess what? I do that every single day. I'm Locked On Bills, but I think as we do consider storylines with offensive coordinators, Joe Brady in Buffalo has to be one of the more compelling things to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Josh Allen, the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills, but a massive amount of transition for the offense. I mean, the only receiver that's on this team that has caught a pass from Josh Allen in a game is Khalil Shakir. That's it. You have a second-year starting back, a third-year back in James Cook, who was very productive last year, and you kind of wonder how much of that was scheme versus James Cook's individual talent. Or he's very talented. He just has limitations that make him a weird running back, okay? And then you're wanting to be this 12 personnel thing, and that's rooted in Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. And Knox got injured in the middle of the season, and it felt like you never really got off the ground with that, but then it looked a lot better later on.
Mm-hmm.
it's a big year, right? I mean, for Joe Brady, and thinking about going back to his time at LSU and very quickly becoming a coordinator with the Panthers and then being the fall guy very quickly there. It's an interesting path. It's the guy Josh Allen wanted. It's the one I wanted, right, based on all the circumstances coming out of the year. But, there's a lot that Joe Brady has to put together with a lot of newness collectively in Buffalo, where, of course, expectations are high when Josh Allen's your quarterback.
So I thought as I was doing the research on Buffalo, what I thought was really interesting was there were 10 teams in the NFL who ran no huddle at least 11% of the time. Buffalo came in 8th on that list, about 13%. They were the only team that surpassed 31 minutes of time of possession, despite being a high-frequency no-huddle football team. So I know Joe Brady, college offense, they like to spread it out and go empty. Then you get to Buffalo, they're pounding the ball. They had the highest incidence of B-gap and inside runs of any team in the league last year. There's a lot that I think this offseason, with him being in place to put more of his fingerprints on it, instead of being kind of handcuffed with midseason being inserted and saying, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what I really think we're good at. And they make the big identity shift. What does it look like?
Yeah.
Right. Like, is the tempo thing going to continue to be a thing for them? Are they going to get more diverse in the run game when you consider James Cook, but they have Josh Allen to kind of implement some of that as well? There's a lot of different ways that they can go. And I think that's why it's such an interesting situation offensively. And it's only going to be spurred on by more flexibility because you don't have a 160 target guy that you're going to feel compelled to force the ball to.
That's the fascinating layer, right? Like, how does Josh Allen operate without funneling 160 targets to Stephon Diggs? Does that, you heard like Jordan Love talk about this in the Doug Farrar article that recently came out. He's like, I kind of like not having a number one receiver because then I can just go to the right place with the football and not worry about mouths to feed. And I think that's the optimistic spin that you take on it if you don't have a number one receiver. But I think you're seeing some of that happen throughout the league, but you're also seeing a lot of teams that are absolutely prioritizing their wide receiver position and very good offenses that are doing it. And so as I think Buffalo has this is a year for them to kind of prove that, as I think a lot of people are maybe expecting to take a step back, fall out of the like elite tier of the AFC. I think everyone thinks the Bills are going to be a good team, but will they be a great team? I think a lot of that's rooted in how this offense comes together, how quickly they do it. And we'll see, right? We'll play the games and see what happens.
Right. Good.
I was just going to shout out Zac Robinson with the Falcons. That's a fascinating situation. Drew Petzing, second season in Arizona. After
I would say he did a lot with a little, but he did an admirable job with what they had to work with last year.
And he's young, like very inexperienced coach. Very tough hand to be dealt. The last thing I think we have to mention, as I know we're up against it, Bobby Slowik's sophomore season in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Expectations are there, man. Right? Like that offense has to be really good. That team has to be really good. And I mean, Bobby Slowik, sensational in year one, young, had some interviews to be a head coach. How do you handle expectations now? And I think that's going to be a big storyline this year.
Right. Also shouting out Todd Monken in Baltimore, getting Derrick Henry added to the mix amidst kind of their changes in their offensive line, what they have with Lamar, what they unlocked with Lamar that they didn't necessarily have with Greg Roman. That's another situation that we both graded pretty favorably. We both had it as a top 10 situation in the league, but nevertheless, there's some intrigue there as far as what direction that they are going to choose to go and how they're going to maximize Henry and running the ball with kind of a wide receiver core that they lost Odell Beckham Jr. free agency, and I know he wasn't a super impactful player. They lost Devin Duvernay in free agency, and I know he's more of a special teams type player, but like there's some turnover type involvement there that they're going to redistribute the football a little bit, and I think that's another one that I'll be watching pretty closely.
Feed Isaiah Likely. Like I want to see him be like a thing with Mark Andrews simultaneously.
Let me confirm this. If you had to guess where the Baltimore Ravens ranked in the NFL last year in target distribution at tight ends.
Like percentage of targets or just pure volume?
Percentage of targets.
I would guess fairly high.
Give me a number.
Rank or you looking for a number?
Rank out of 32.
I would hope it's top 10.
It is 10th.
Okay.
There's room to grow there.
Let's get in the top 5.
Yep. And top 5 would be a difference of an additional 5%.
Do you have the top? Who are the top 5 teams in percentage of targets to tight ends?
Okay, let me do the thing. You want to guess?
Oh God.
I'll give you a clue. The team that ran the most 13 personnel in 1st and 10.
Okay, hi Kansas City. Thanks for being here.
Okay, they're fourth on this list.
Okay, you got to give me a second. I got
28%.
We nobody knows how to crash an end of a podcast like we do.
You should be able to get one of these because this player caught like 120 passes last year.
Okay, I'm pulling up a list of NFL teams. That's how I do this because we do these guessing games a million times. Like it always happens. Okay, so we've established. I'm trying to get the top 5.
Top 5.
The Vikings threw the ball to TJ Hawkinson every single play. He's got to be high on that.
No.
The Vikings aren't high on this?
No.
What?
Remember, they threw the ball to Justin Jefferson every time.
Oh, I forgot they also have receivers. I got, okay.
And Jordan Addison.
Now that makes me feel weird about Evan, because I know Evan Ingram got 1 billion targets.
It's
got to be the Jaguars.
The Jaguars with Evan Ingram are 5th. So you have 4 and 5.
So 4 and
Wait,
5.
I lied. Minnesota was actually 3rd. I don't know what I was looking at.
Okay, so I have 3. Yes. So I have the Vikings, the Jaguars, and the Chiefs.
Minnesota at 29%, Kansas City at 28%, Jacksonville at 27%.
So what numbers do you need left?
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Percentage of targets.
Percentage of targets to tight ends.
I know that the Cardinals threw the ball. Ertz had some production, and so did McBride, and they don't have any receivers. So I'm going to throw the Cardinals out there.
That is number 2 at 32%.
So number 1's the team that I'm stuck on right now?
Number 1's the mystery team. And there's players here, but I would encourage you to think about the coach.
Okay, if you want me to think about the coach, that's all I'm leaning into. And I know Njoku had a good year. Kevin Stefanski, tight ends are his thing. Is it the Browns?
Yep. They were 6th.
Oh, damn.
So I still need number.
Okay. Yeah. Think about the coach. Dan Campbell's a tight end?
Detroit was 7th at 24%.
Damn. I got 2. Freaking number 1 team's the one that's throwing me off.
He got criticized for his usage here.
Falcons?
The Falcons at 34% were number 1 for targets.
Oh, you know what? Jonnu Smith had some run there too.
Yeah, he had a lot of run last year. So the Falcons at 34%, the Cardinals at 32%, Minnesota at 29%, Kansas City at 28%, Jacksonville at 27%, Cleveland at 26%, and then Detroit at 24%. Those were the 7 that you got in your quest to find the top 5. Buffalo was 8th, 23.
That's going to come up.
And then it was Chicago and Baltimore at 23% as well. That rounds out the top 10. Who is the worst team in the NFL tight end target? You all get this one.
It's Miami.
Yeah, 9%.
Are you kidding me?
9%.
You're throwing the ball to those receivers and running backs. Never throwing it to Durham Smythe. I saw him try to do it. That's why I think Jonnu Smith's going to be a big deal for them.
Miami was 3rd in wide receiver target share and 7th in running back target share and dead last in tight.
Give us the bottom 5 while we're here. We got
bottom 5 while we're here and we're wrapping up.
Yeah, we got to do it.
The Dolphins 9%, the Broncos 12%. They need Greg Dulcich back.
Come on, Greg, get that hamstring right, brother.
So this one's interesting. The Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, good.
With now 2 top 50 picks at tight end, were 3rd worst at 14%. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who seemingly have made significant tight end investments 3 consecutive years, also at 14%, were 4th. And then the LA Rams, who never put tight ends on the field, were 5th at 15% target share to tight ends. So there you go. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We will be back again tomorrow to do the same thing with defensive coordinators. We hope you come back and see us then.